Every night, I sleep under a crucifix that chooses who will die. My name is Hans Keller. I was a senator in the 2 Company, Grenadier-Regiment 735, Italian Front, 1944. Back then, our dressing station was a church, cold and damp, with a big wooden Christ nailed above the rows of cots. His painted eyes never looked at me. They looked at the ones who wouldn't last till morning. Now I lie on this narrow mattress in the Pflegeheim plastic cover, squeaking every time my hip twitches, and I watch the little crucifix on the wall. Cheap wood, factory paint, Christ's head tilted to the right, the way it was when my daughter bought it in the church shop. The radiator ticks. Someone coughs down the corridor. It smells of disinfectant and boiled potatoes, instead of carbolic and blood. When I woke up half an hour ago, his head was tilted to the right. Now it is tilted to the left. My hearing aid hums. I take it out. The room goes soft, like cotton pushed into my ears. Without it, I shouldn't hear anything but my own breath and the distant TV in the day room. Instead, underneath the buzz of the lights, I catch another sound, hot wax hitting stone. I smell it before I hear it. Old candle smoke, damp plaster, wet wool, the air of a nave with too many bodies in it and not enough prayers. I push myself up on my elbows. My hand shakes and the blanket rasps against my skin. I am 88 years old and my fingers still want to count compresses and tie off bandages. The crucifix is no bigger than my palm, but his painted eyes are not looking at me anymore. They are looking at the empty bed by the window. Ails in Ordnung, Herr Keller. The night nurse passes in the hallway, her shoes squeaking. For a moment, her shadow cuts under my door, long and thin, the shape of a cassock instead of a uniform. Air freshener turns to incense in my nose. Dust settles on my tongue, fine and cold, the kind that coats hymnals in churches the army has taken over. I do not answer her. I watch the crucifix. Christ's head is still now. Left shoulder dipped, chin turned toward the other bed. The pillow there is smooth. The man who slept in it Lenz died last week. Stroke, they said. They took his clothes and his glasses and his boots. Left nothing. The head started to turn the night before they carried him out. Just like it did, once, in that church in Italy, when I was still young enough to pretend I didn't understand what it meant. My thumb finds the ridge on my forefinger, where a ring used to sit. I feel the phantom weight of a field dressing bag on my shoulder. The ticking of the radiator changes. It becomes the slow, irregular drip of water somewhere far above. A leak in an old roof, splashing into metal buckets. The first time I saw a crucifix move, the roof really was leaking. We had marched all day up those Italian roads. North of Florence somewhere. The maps said Toscana. To me it was just hills that never ended, olive trees that did not give shade, and stone houses with shutters closed so tight they looked blind. My boots were wet from a creek we had forded at dawn. My socks clung to my skin and made little squelching sounds with every step. Senator, keep up, unteroffizier, Metz snapped without looking back. He had a way of talking like a man, giving orders in his sleep. Cigarette stuck to his lower lip, helmet strap loose, rifle bouncing against his shoulder. He walked like the hills were flat and the war would politely step aside for him. I shifted the strap of my medical bag and quickened my pace. The bandages inside it had soaked up enough blood in the last year to smell like rust, even when they were clean. My fingers brushed the small metal cross on the flap as I moved. Not my idea. Feldferaho had given it to me in Russia and said the wounded liked to see it. We have quarters in a church, he had said that morning, riding in the back of the truck beside me, his black chaplain's collar turned up against the wind. Isn't that better than a barn? He smiled when he said it, but there were dark smudges under his eyes. He always looked tired, even when he had just woken up. His fingers smelled of tobacco and candle wax and old paper. He kept a little black book in his pocket for the names of the dead. The village lay in a fold of the hills, roofs of red tile and stone walls, the color of old bones. A bell tower rose above it, pale against the sky. No bell rang when we entered. The square was empty. One dog barked, then shut up, when Metz raised his rifle a little. We moved into the church before the light faded. San Michele, the sign said, in flaking paint. Saint Michael with a sword carved above the door, his wings chipped and his face smoothed by rain. The air inside was cold and thick and smelled of stone, incense, and something else. Something like rainwater that had been sitting in a bucket for too long. Jesus, Carl Henning muttered behind me, shivering as the cool hit his sweat. He was the funker, the radio man, thin as a wire, with a voice that always sounded like he was about to laugh. Feels like a cave. Show some respect, Jorge said, but there was no anger in it. He stepped past us, boots loud on the flagstones, and went straight down the central aisle. His cassock flapped over his trousers. Above the altar, in the dim light that leaked through stained glass, the crucifix hung. It was larger than I expected. Not like the clean, polished crosses in some Bavarian churches I'd seen as a boy. Christ here was almost life-size, carved from dark, heavy wood. His ribs sharp under straining skin, his knees knotted, his feet nailed together with a thick iron spike. The crown of thorns had been carved to each point, digging into his forehead. The eyes were not closed. They were half open, carved with such care that from a distance they looked like glass. He looked to the right, not straight down at the altar, not out over the pews. His head was turned, neck straining, to look to the right-hand side of the nave, just above where the front pews ended. Crocifisso dei condannati, a voice said in Italian behind us. The crucifix of the condemned. We turned. An old woman stood in the doorway, shawl over her hair, hands on the handle of a wooden bucket. Her dress was black from throat to ankle. Her face had more lines than the map in Metz's pocket. The Carabinieri had brought her in, their hands on her elbows, but they let go when she stopped. What did she say? Metz asked. Henning understood a little Italian. He shrugged. Crucifix of the condemned, he repeated. Sounds cheerful. He stepped forward, his boots echoing in the quiet. Signora, he said in slow German-laced Italian, we need use of the church. For a few days. The bishop has agreed. She looked at him, then at the crucifix, then at us. Her eyes were pale and watery, but they were not afraid. She shifted the bucket on her hip. The water inside it moved. I heard it slap the sides, sharp in the stillness. Lui guarda, quelli che porta via, she said. Her gaze settled on me for a moment, then on Henning, then on Metz. She shook her head once, sharply, like a woman pushing away a fly. Nan dormite, Sato, di lui. Henning leaned toward me as she walked away, muttering to Ho. She says, he looks at the ones he takes away, he whispered, and, not to sleep under him. I looked up again. The crucifix stared past us, neck turned, eyes fixed on the patch of wall, where light from a high window turned the stone a sickly yellow. We slept under him that night anyway. They pushed the pews to the sides to make room for stretchers. The floor was dusty, with faint white lines where benches had stood for years. My medical corner was set up near the side altar. Table, lamp, enamel bowl, the smell of iodine and wet wool. The wounded we had brought with us from the last position lay lined up with blankets pulled to their chins. One man coughed in his sleep, a wet rattling sound that made the candle flames shiver. Scheit Platz Metz muttered, rolling his shoulders. I'd rather take a barn. At least barns have hay, Emil Kruger said. He was the youngest in our section, 19 at most, with a face that still had boy in it when he took off his helmet. He fingered the rosary under his tunic whenever artillery started. I had seen the beads imprint crescents on his skin. Henning sat on a crate, radio set beside him, antenna landing somewhere up in the rafters. He pulled out his harmonica and blew a few soft notes, something slow and homesick. The sound mixed with the drip-drip from a crack in the roof above the side aisle. Water tapped into a metal bucket someone had placed there. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm never matched the song. Stop that, Metz said without heat. You'll make the saint come down and complain. San Michele doesn't mind music, Henning said. He nodded toward the statue. Saint Michael lifted his sword above a demon curled under his feet. The demon's face had been worn smooth by fingers. He minds liars and cowards, and chaplains who sleep too much, I added. Oh, he was on a pallet near the front, his black coat folded under his head. His hands were clasped on his chest. His lips moved silently. I could not hear the words, but his fingers twitched like someone counting, name after name after name. The crucifix above him still looked to the right. I slept badly. The stone under my back stayed cold, no matter how I shifted. Sometime deep in the night, when the last roll calls and mutters had faded, and even Kruger's quiet prayers had stopped, I woke up with my heart pounding. I did not know why at first. The candles on the altar had burned down to stubs. Shadows leaned long and bent over the floor. The smell of wax was heavy. My throat was dry. For a moment, I thought I heard organ music. Just 3 or 4 notes, drawn out and thin, as if someone were pressing the keys with a gloved hand. Then I realized what had changed. The crucifix was looking at me. I could see only the lower half of it at first, from where I lay. The feet dark and thin, the nail, the toes curled. I pushed myself up on one elbow, my blanket whispering against the stone. My shoulder burned. I ignored it. The movement of a single candle threw light up across the body, up the ribs, the chest, the hollow at the throat. His head was turned more than before. His chin was lowered. The grooves cut for the neck muscles stood out deeper. The eyes, carved under heavy lids, were no longer aimed at that patch of yellowed wall. They were angled down, toward the space where my pallet lay. The hollow between the brows seemed deeper. I swallowed. My tongue stuck to my teeth. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I told myself every story I knew about shadows. I did not wake anyone. In the morning, Henning nudged my boot with his own. "You look like shit, Hans," he said, grinning. "Nightmare." "The roof," I said. It dripped on me. He laughed and stood, stretching. "You can swap with me if you want. Then he'll watch me instead." He jerked his chin up at the crucifix and winked. Ho-Ho lit candles beneath it, the match flaring bright, the sulfur biting my nose. He looked up at Christ's face as he worked, watching the shadows shift over the wooden features. His lips tightened for a second. "Was Stimmt nicht, Herr Feldfahrer?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "The church moves. Old buildings do that." He adjusted the base of the cross, where it met the wall, his fingers pressed against wood that should have been still. "We will have a brief service before you go out. 1200 hours. Bring whoever is not on duty." By the time the first shells found us, I had stopped thinking about the crucifix. We were dug in along a low ridge above the village, in old Italian positions that someone had carved out of the hillside long before we arrived. Sandbags, rock walls, mud. The olive trees around us were black skeletons against the sky. Allied artillery probed, feeling out the slopes, thumping into the far side of the valley. "Sanator," Metz called, waving me over. Kruger got a splinter. It was nothing. A shard of rock or shell casing had sliced his cheek and left a neat line under his eye. Blood ran down toward his jaw. He flinched when I dabbed it with iodine. "Hold still," I said. "It's only skin." "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "You don't have to write to my mother if it scars. Your mother will kiss you either way," Henning said, crouched in his hole with the radio headset askew. He chewed on a cigarette instead of smoking it, the paper sticking to his lip. "Tell her you got it from a beautiful senora who slapped you. They all keep their shutters closed," Kruger said. "Only the old one in black looks." "The one with the bucket?" I asked. He nodded. "She was in the church again this morning. She touched the feet on the crucifix and then refused to look up at his face. She said something about his neck. Shells stepped closer for a while, then drifted away. The sky stayed low and gray. Mud clung to our boots and dried there in the wind. It was like that for days. A few wounded, scraped hands, cracked lips, diarrhea from bad water. I cleaned, bandaged, wrote names. Hohe moved between positions with his little black book, offering confessions in whispers, giving blessings with tired fingers. The first man died 3 days later. His name was Weber, just Weber. I never heard his first name. He was older than most of us, already thinning on top, with a cough that sounded like it belonged to a chimney. He had a habit of touching his cap before stepping out of any doorway. One tap, like he was checking it, still existed. That morning, before dawn, he came into the church to light a candle. I was half awake on my pallet, the stone cold under my hip. The air was blue with early light. Weber moved like a man trying not to disturb a nest of birds. His boots creaked. He lit a taper, bent to the little stand near the side of the nave, and whispered something under his breath. As he turned to go, he stopped under the crucifix. Just stopped. His shoulders tightened. His hand went up to his cap, touched it once, then again, slower. "Don't stare at it," I said quietly. My voice sounded too loud in the empty space. He looked over at me, eyes narrow, mouth twisted in a smile that did not reach them. "You see it too?" he asked. "See what?" He's not looking where he did before. He jerked his chin upward. "Neck like that is not good for a man. It's wood," I said. He snorted. "Wood burns," he said. "So do we." He left. I listened to his boots crossing the square outside, the crunch of gravel, the distant cough of a truck starting. The smell of his cigarette smoke followed him out like a shadow. 2 hours later, a shell landed directly on the dugout, where he and 2 others were taking cover. When they pulled the bodies out, there was not much to bandage: a boot, a hand, a strip of coat with the name tag still attached. The air smelled of earth and powder and something sweet and sick that clung to the back of my throat. Jorge opened his book, his pen hovering. "Name?" he asked. "Weber," Metz said. "Just Weber." Jorge wrote it. The ink looked too bright on the old paper. That night, when we came back to the church with the last stretcher, I looked up. The crucifix's head was tilted farther. His gaze had moved past where my pallet lay and down toward the space near the entrance, where Weber had paused to touch his cap. The line of the jaw seemed sharper. Wood did not move like that. Not without cracking. There was no crack. "Leave it," I told myself in a whisper, pulling a blanket up over a groaning man's feet. "Leave it. You have work." But I watched Jorge the next morning, when he lit the candles again. His hand hesitated at the base of the cross. His mouth flattened. He said something under his breath, Latin or German, I could not tell. "Do you believe in that story?" I asked him later, when we were alone near the sacristy, rolling bandages. "What story?" His fingers moved automatically, smooth and practiced. "The one the old woman told." He looks at the condemned. He wiped his hands on a towel. "It is an old village tale," he said. "They had an execution here once, a long time ago, when the Austrians held this valley, I think. They say." The crucifix turned its head away from the men who refused to confess. The priest took it as a sign. "Turned away," I repeated. "Not toward." He closed the towel, folding it into a square. "Stories change," he said. "People tell them in ways that make them feel safer." He glanced up at the cross. "Or less safe. His neck will break," I said. "It is already broken," Jorge replied softly. "That is the point. The next man who died was one of mine. Not my blood, but my hands knew every scar on his skin by then. Kruger had been in my care since Russia. Frostbite there, shrapnel here, a cut on his arm from a barbed wire fence he had tried to climb when a cow spooked him in the Ukraine. He talked too fast when he was nervous, like words might protect him better than a helmet. He also prayed too much for Metz's liking. "If you keep bothering the Lord, he'll send you extra homework," Metz would say, cuffing him lightly on the back of the head. "Save some of that rosary for when you really need it." I saw him standing under the crucifix the night before the patrol that killed him. The church was fuller that evening. More units in the area. Some men from another company, faces I did not know, sat on the pews with their hands folded, eyes up. Jorge had promised a short service before we rotated back into the line. Candles burned in thick clusters. Shadows climbed the carved saints along the walls. Kruger stood near the front, just to the right of center, fingers clenched around something in his pocket. His face was pale, lips moving silently. I could not hear what he was saying over the murmur of men and the occasional cough. The crucifix looked straight at him, not at the entrance now, not at my pallet, down fixated. The angle of the neck was wrong, like someone had stepped behind the cross and twisted it until the vertebrae popped. I felt a twinge at the back of my own neck as I stared. "Do you see that?" Henning whispered beside me. He smelled of sweat and stale tobacco. His hand tightened on the harmonica in his pocket. "Please tell me it always looked like that." "Stop it," I said. "You are making yourself crazy." "Then it is working," he said. He tried to laugh and failed. Jorge stepped up to the altar and began the prayers. His voice was low, firm words rolling over Latin and German. The men shifted, eyes down, some mouthing along, some staring at the floor like they were listening to a language only their boots understood. I watched the crucifix. A drop of wax slid down the side of the candle nearest the altar. It drove a little furrow in the white column, glowing as it went. For a moment, in that light, I thought I saw moisture at the corner of Christ's carved eye. Just a glimmer, like water about to fall. When the patrol went out at midnight, Metz led. Kruger was second in the file. I checked his bandolier, his boots, his helmet strap. My hand lingered for a moment on his shoulder. "Rosary," I said. "Take it." He frowned. "I never go without it." "Keep it in your pocket," I said. "Not around your neck. It can snag." He smiled, quick and embarrassed. "You believe it now too," he said. "I believe in pockets," I said. They disappeared into the dark gaps between the olive trees, boots whispering on dry leaves. The night smelled of earth cooling, smoke from village hearths, and something metallic in the air that made my teeth ache. Half an hour later, the first shots echoed off the hills. It was not clear at first. A burst here, a single shot there, then silence again. The radio crackled. Voices overlapped, thin and distorted. Henning hunched over the set, his shoulders tight. "Say again," he said. "Say again, your last." The reply was a scream. You hear a lot of sounds in a war. Men who have been shot through the lungs sound different from those hit in the belly. But there is a pitch that comes when someone is not afraid of death, but of what his eyes are seeing just before it. High, tearing. It makes everyone who hears it stand up straighter, even if they do not know they are moving. We went out with the stretcher. Me, Metz, 2 others. The olive trees closed around us. The earth here was soft, recently plowed. Our boots sank. The stars overhead were faint in a sky that felt too low. Kruger Metz shouted, "Answer, damn you." He did not. The only response was a rustle ahead, something heavy moving. We found the first body where the field dipped, just beyond a low stone wall. One of the other men from the patrol. His throat was gone. So was his helmet. His hand still clutched his rifle, fingers stiff. "What did that?" One of the stretcher bearers whispered. "Shrapnel," I said, though there were no shell holes. "Maybe a mine." The ground under his back was churned up. It smelled of fresh earth and another sweeter scent that made my stomach clench. We found Kjarger 10 meters further on. His body lay on his back, half in a shallow ditch, half on the slope. His rosary was tangled in his fingers. His mouth was open, teeth bared. His eyes stared up at the sky, wide and glassy. His head was twisted far to the right. Not just a little, not the way a man might turn to look at something. His shoulders were straight, arms by his sides, legs pointing down the hill. His neck had given way just above the collarbones. The skin was stretched tight over something broken below. His chin almost touched his shoulder. I knelt beside him. The stretcher thumped down behind me. The night pressed close. I could hear my own breath, harsh and fast in my ears. "Tripwire," one of the others said. "Did he hit something?" "His legs are fine," Metz said. His voice was flat. "No blast, no burns." I ran my fingers under his neck, feeling for entry wounds, bone fragments, anything that made sense. There was no blood, only the wrong angle. I had seen men with broken necks before. Falls from trucks, roofs, the odd unlucky jump. The muscles go slack, the head lolls. They do not settle like this, locked in a position that looked too precise, too deliberate. His face was aimed back, toward the village, toward the church. I closed his eyes with my thumb and forefinger. The lids did not want to move. Back in the church, the air had gone from cold to close. Too many bodies, living and dead. The wounded groaned. Someone vomited in a bucket. The smell of blood and soap and candle smoke made a film in my nose. We laid Kruger out on a pallet near the front. Hohe stood there waiting, hands tight on the little black book. His collar was undone. His hair clung damply to his forehead. "I'll do the prayers now," he said quietly. Before you, Ja," I said. I stepped back. He opened the book, flipped to a fresh page, and dipped his pen in ink. The nib scratched softly. "Name?" he said. I swallowed. "Emil Kruger, Jeff Ryder, 2nd Company," he wrote. The ink shone wet in the candlelight. Then his eyes, without moving his head, slid up. I followed them. The crucifix's head had moved again. His chin was not aimed at the doorway anymore, nor at where Weber had stood, nor at the space over my pallet. It was angled down, neck straining, to stare directly at the pallet where Kruger's body lay. The muscles on the carved throat stood out like cords. The paint around the eyes had cracked, tiny hairlines running out from the corners, as if something inside the wood were pushing to see more. Wax dripped, slow. It hit the floor with little, precise ticks. The sound matched the rhythm of my heart, then overran it. "Don't write his name," I said. Ho's pen hovered over the line. "What? Don't write it," I repeated. My mouth was dry. My tongue felt too big. "Leave that one blank." He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were tired, not angry. He closed the book slowly, without making a mark. "It's already written," he said. He tapped his temple. Here, the pattern did not stop. Men began to notice. They are not fools, soldiers, not the ones who live long enough to sleep in churches like that one. They see details. They catalog them, even when they pretend not to. "Watch where he looks before you go out," someone said one evening, half joking as he laced his boots. "If he chooses you, trade places." "Not funny," another replied, but he checked anyway, eyes flicking up to the cross, then away. We had a rotation, the front line, then the church, then back up again. The Allies pushed, probed, shelled. Our maps changed color. The hills did not. Fog came some mornings, clinging low to the ground like smoke that refused to rise. One afternoon, an Italian priest came, escorted by 2 officers. He was younger than I expected, with dark hair and quick hands. He crossed himself as he entered, his eyes taking in the moved pews, the stretcher rows, the open medical kit, the men sitting where his parishioners used to kneel. "What does he want?" Metz asked. "His church back," Henning said. The priest and Hohe spoke near the altar. Their voices were low, fast, Italian and German tangled. The priest gestured up at the crucifix, fingers sharp. Ho answered with a tight jaw. At one point, the priest made as if to climb the little side steps to reach the base of the cross. "Signore Nancy Toka," the old woman in black, said suddenly from the back. I had not seen her come in. She stood in the doorway again, bucket in hand. "Levet, Fado Gerari Voi, Ora Vi Garda," Henning translated later, over a tin of watery soup. "You turned him," he said, stirring now. "He looks at you." "I didn't touch it," I said. "She didn't mean you," Henning said. "She meant us. All of us." The priest left without the crucifix. Howie watched him go, his hand pressed flat against the hymnal on the pulpit. That night, he asked for a bunk, away from directly under the cross. He pretended it was because of drafts. A week later, the big attack came. We knew it was coming. You can feel when the air thickens, when officers walk faster, when messages come more often. Trucks moved up the valley at night. We could see the glow of distant fires on the horizon. The artillery grew more systematic, as if someone were tapping the positions on a giant map with a careful finger. "Prepare for withdrawal," Metz said quietly, as we cleaned rifles in the yard behind the church. "Or for staying and dying. One of the two." "Comforting," Henning said. He blew into the barrel of his weapon, the wind sending dust back into his face. "If they hit the church, we're all icons." "They won't hit the church," I said. "They need landmarks too. They'll hit everything," Metz said. We went up again. The ridge, the holes, the cold. The first barrage came at dawn, when the sky was a thin, gray sheet. The shells walked up the slope, heavy ones, the ground jerking under our bellies. Mud sprayed, stones chipped. Men yelled without words. I moved between positions, hunched low, my bag thumping against my hip. A man with a torn ear here, another with shrapnel in his thigh there. Bandage, morphine, a pat on the shoulder. "You'll be all right." The lies I had learned to tell as easily as my own name. The first wave of infantry rolled up toward us mid-morning. I do not remember the insignia on their sleeves. British, perhaps, or Indian. They were shapes at that distance, moving behind the low stone walls, firing, ducking. Our machine guns chattered. Smoke spread like dirty curtains. In the middle of reloading bandages from my bag, I felt it. Not a sound, not at first. A weight, low in my stomach. The sensation of being watched from above, like a light shining down between my shoulder blades. I turned. The church was behind and below us, its bell tower, a pale fang against the sky. A shell burst nearby, throwing up a column of earth and smoke. Through it, for a heartbeat, I saw the nave window flash. I could not see the crucifix from here, but I felt the exact angle of his neck, the way his head would be turned now, strained toward the ridge, toward us. "Move, Hans," Metz shouted. A shell hit close enough that the shock slapped my whole body. My ears rang. Time broke into sharp pieces. After that, the hours bled. We fell back in stages, from one line of pits to another, always down toward the village. The air tasted of metal and dust. My hands were raw. I do not remember how many bandages I tied, how many injections I gave, how many men I left with a blanket over their faces, because there was nothing else to do. By evening, the church was a dressing station and a last line. We carried them in one after another, arms over shoulders, legs dragging, boots, leaving streaks of mud and blood on the steps. The bell tower had a jagged bite taken out of it, where a shell had clipped it, but the main structure still stood. The air inside shook with the constant, distant thud of impacts. "Put them here," I said, pointing. "And here. Leave room down the middle." I worked on automatic tourniquet, clamp, bandage, move. The crucifix hung above us all, darker now, against the smoke-stained ceiling. Candle flames shuddered with each hit. At some point, I realized Ho was not moving. He stood directly under the cross, face lifted, eyes tracing a slow, terrible path around the room. Left, right, left. His lips moved. His hands were open at his sides. "Feldfahrer," I said. "We need you." He did not answer at first. Then he spoke, not to me. "No more," he whispered, Italian and German tangled. "Basta j-" "No more." Another stretcher came in. The man on it had no legs. Bone stuck out of the bandage at his thigh, white as candles. He moaned once, then went quiet. His hand slipped from the edge, fingers brushing the stone. The crucifix's head shifted. I saw it, not in the corner of my eye, not as a trick of shadow. The muscles in the neck flexed, wood that had no right to move, rippling as if something inside it had turned. The iron spike in the feet creaked. Dust drifted down, fine as flour. The eyes slid down and fixed on the man with no legs. His chest stopped moving. My mouth opened. No sound came out. Ho-Hei stumbled backward, as if someone had shoved him. He grabbed the base of the cross with both hands and shook. "Stop," he hissed. "Stop it. Look at me instead. Look at me." A crack sounded, sharp and flat. For a moment, I thought the wood had given way, but the cross held. His hands slipped. His fingernails scraped splinters. "Or," Metz shouted from the doorway, "we need your hands, not your arguments." Another shell hit close. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The statue of a saint toppled and smashed, pieces skittering across the floor. Someone screamed as a shard cut into their arm. I grabbed Ho's shoulder and pulled him away from the cross. His collar was damp with sweat. His eyes were wild. "They are all dying where he looks," he said. "Don't you see?" "I see blood loss," I said. "I see shock. I see you wasting time." He laughed once, a sound with no humor in it. "Faithless," he said. "Even now, I have too much faith in veins and arteries," I snapped. "Help me, or leave." He helped. For a while, we worked side by side, his hands steady on foreheads, mine steady on wounds. He murmured words over each man as I bandaged them. Latin, German, sometimes only their names. Henning came in with a wound in his side, shirt soaked down to his belt. He grinned, teeth red at the edges. "Radio's gone," he said. "They'll miss my music." "Lie down," I said. "Ho, I'm here," Ho said. He pressed his hand over my bandage as I wrapped it tight. "Breathe, Carlin. Out." Henning's eyes flicked up once, toward the crucifix. "Is he watching?" he asked, voice slurred. "Everyone is watching," I said. "Shut up and live." For a brief hour, it felt like we might hold. The fire slackened. The distant guns shifted their aim, probing elsewhere. The men in the church stopped groaning as loudly. Some even slept. Then the shell came in at the perfect angle. There was no warning whistle, no finely timed sense of approach, just a sudden, blinding white and a sound that was not sound at all, but pressure. The world kicked sideways. I found myself on the floor, ears roaring, mouth full of dust. The front half of the nave was a mess of shattered stone, broken pews, and bodies. Light poured through a hole where part of the roof had been. The altar was cracked down the middle. The crucifix still hung. The wall around its base was fractured. Lines split outward, like the web of a spider in glass. Christ's body leaned forward at a new angle, the weight of it pulling on the swollen iron nails. One of his arms had loosed a little, the wrist sagging, the carved hand open, as if reaching. His head jerked. It did not glide now. It snapped. Once, twice, 3 times, like a man shaking off water. Each time, his gaze fell on someone. A man trying to pull himself out from under a beam. Another pushing debris off his legs. A stretcher bearer crawling toward a groaning comrade. Each man the eyes settled on went still. "Stop it," I whispered. My throat burned. Dust scratched my words on the way out. Ho stood in the middle of the wreckage, coat torn, blood on his forehead. He looked up, eyes wide. "Take me," he shouted. "You hear me? Take me. Not them, me." His voice cracked on the last word. He stepped forward, slipping on debris, and planted himself directly under the cross, arms spread. "For every man you look at me instead," he said. "For every name you take mine." The eyes rolled. It is a stupid sentence to think, even now. Wood does not have eyes. Paint does not move. But they did. The pupils, black and flat, seemed to swivel in their carved sockets. They settled on his face. Nothing happened. The silence, for that heartbeat, was worse than any shell. Then, slowly, painfully, as if resisting, the head turned away. It angled to the side, neck muscles straining, carving, creaking. It fixed on another man, a young one from a different company, whose name I never learned. His hand was reaching for a fallen helmet. His mouth shaped a word. I did not hear it. He collapsed, arm dropping, fingers brushing the helmet's brim. Hohei stared. "Why?" he whispered. "Why him? Why not me?" He grabbed the ledger from his pocket and tore it open. Pages whipped in the wind that now pushed through the broken roof. "Whom do you want?" he shouted at the cross. "Which names?" The pages fluttered. A gust of air tore one free. It spiraled upward, then down again, landing face up in a pool of water and dust at my feet. Ink bled, lines blurred, but one name remained clear for a moment before the water soaked it. Carl Henning. I looked up. Henning lay near the side aisle, half covered by a section of fallen beam. His hand stuck out. The fingers twitched once. His eyes were open, staring at the crucifix. There was a beam across his chest, but it did not look heavy enough to kill a man by itself. His lips moved. No sound came. I stumbled toward him. My knee screamed as a piece of glass shoved into it protested. I ignored it. My hand slipped on the wet stone. When I reached him and put 2 fingers to his throat, there was nothing. His harmonica lay by his hand, dented but intact. Later, when I emptied his pockets, I found the photograph of his wife and daughter. The corner had been bent so often, the paper was almost white where the crease ran. After the worst of it, after the fire shifted in our line, such as it was, fell back through the village to another nameless ridge, the church stood open to the sky. We abandoned it that night. Orders: pull back, regroup, let the rear guard burn what needed burning, and leave the rest to the Italians and the saints. I was in the last group out. The wounded who could walk walked. The ones who could not, we carried. The dead, most of them, stayed where they were. There is a point at which you stop counting, for self-defense. My hands had lost feeling hours before. I remember straps cutting into my shoulders, the taste of dust, the flares painting the clouds red. On my last trip through the nave, I stopped. The crucifix hung at an impossible angle, one arm almost free, the head bowed so far to one side it seemed ready to tear off. Smoke curled around it. The smell was a mix of incense residue, charred wood, and something else that made me think of a butcher's shop. Hohe was not there. I had seen him earlier, arguing with a major near the sacristy, gesturing toward the cross, then toward the door. The major had shaken his head. I had not heard the words. Now, the place where they had stood was empty. At the base of the crucifix, in the rubble, lay his little black book. Pages fluttered in the draft, edges blackened. Some names had smeared beyond recognition, others held neat and dark. I bent and picked it up. The cover stuck to my fingers. The leather was warm. For a moment, a stupid, childish thought crossed my mind. If I rip out the pages with the names of the men still breathing, they will live. I flipped it open. My own name was there, written in his small, careful script. H. Keller, Obergefreiter, Senator. The date beside it was not that day's, it was from months before. Scratched in during a night in Russia, when a truck I had been riding in had overturned in a ditch and rolled twice. I had come out with only bruises. He had written me down anyway, he said, just in case the paperwork needed catching up. I tore the page out. The paper made a sound like dry skin. The crucifix groaned. It is ridiculous to type that word. Groaned. It sounds like something from a cheap story, but it did. The wood shifted under stresses that should have broken it long before. The iron nail at the feet screeched a little as it slid half an inch. Dust rained down. Christ's head turned. Slowly, with agonizing reluctance, like a man forced to look at something he cannot bear, he lifted his gaze from the space where the last of the bodies lay and fixed it on me. My chest tightened. For a heartbeat, I could not breathe. His eyes were not glass. They were only carved and painted. But in that moment, lit from below by surviving candles, and from above by a rent in the roof that let in thin evening light, they looked wet. I heard footsteps behind me. "Leave it, Hans," Met said. His voice sounded far away, like he was speaking down a long corridor. "We have to go." I shoved the book into my bag without closing it. One corner stuck out. Names brushed the canvas. As I stepped back, my boot kicked something. A small wooden cross, much simpler than the big crucifix, lay among the rubble. It had probably fallen from a side altar, or from a child's grave marker someone had brought inside. No figure on it. Just 2 pieces of wood joined, the grain dark with age. Without thinking, I picked it up. "Leave that too," Met said. Souvenir curses are bad luck. It's just wood, I said. So is he, Metz replied. We left the village that night. They shelled it after we went. Artillery does not care about saints. As we climbed the opposite slope, I looked back once. The church roof was fully gone now, flames licking at the cracked walls. The bell tower leaned, then sagged, then folded in on itself like a man giving up. For a second, as the tower fell, fire flared in the open nave. In that light, high above the shattered altar, I thought I saw the silhouette of the crucifix still hanging, the head at that terrible angle, neck straining to follow us up the hill. Then the smoke swallowed it. The war went on. I will not list the places. It would bore you, or worse, interest you. More hills, more ditches, more names written and crossed out. We lost Metz 2 months later to a mine. His body was in 3 main pieces when I reached him. His boots were still laced properly. I did not see any crucifixes move after that, but I kept the small wooden cross. When they finally sent me back to Germany with a piece of metal in my hip and an honorable discharge, the cross was in the bottom of my kit. My mother took it for the kitchen wall. You need something holy looking after you, she said, hanging it near the window. His head was straight when she put it up. Years later, after she died and I married and had a daughter of my own, it moved with us from flat to flat. Kitchen, hallway, bedroom. Sometimes I forgot it was there for months at a time. Then something would happen. A neighbor would not come back from a trip. A man I worked with at the factory would collapse on the job. My father-in-law would sit down in his chair after dinner and not stand up again. Each time, when I looked up, the cross was not the way I remembered. A tilt of the head, a shift in the grain, a shadow that made the vertical beam look less than straight. After my wife died, my daughter gave me a new crucifix from the church shop. The old one is falling apart, she said, taking the small wooden cross carefully off the nail. It's cracked. I'll keep it in a box. She hung the new one on the wall above my bed in the Pflegeheim, smiling, adjusting it until it was straight. Christ's head tilted calmly to the right, painted eyes downcast toward my pillow. It will watch over you, she said. She kissed my forehead and left. Her perfume lingered in the air after the door closed, mixing with the smell of disinfectant and old sheets. That night, I woke to the smell of candle wax. There were no candles here. The radiator ticked. The clock on the bedside table glowed green. 2 in the morning. A distant lift hummed. Someone moaned in a room down the corridor, then fell silent. I looked up. Christ's head was no longer tilted to the right. It was turned to the left, toward the empty bed. They found Lenz in the morning. Face slack, eyes half open, hand curled toward the call button, but not quite touching it. The doctor said it was peaceful. His heart had simply stopped. They stripped the bed, took the sheets, the thin mattress, the little metal table where his glasses had rested for the last 3 years. They left the mark of the bed's feet on the linoleum. Rectangles on the floor, darker than the rest. That night, the crucifix looked straight down again, as if nothing had changed. I asked my daughter to bring me the old wooden cross from the box. She frowned. It's ugly now, she said. Split down the middle. But if you want it, I do, I said. She brought it the next day, wrapped in an old dish towel. The wood had darkened further. A crack ran along the horizontal beam, almost to the center. I held it in my hands, feeling the grain under my fingertips, the small notch where my boot had chipped it in the church. Do you want it on the wall too? She asked. No, I said. On the bedside table. She set it there, propped against the lamp. 2 crosses now. One above, one at eye level. That night, I lay awake, listening. The building has its own sounds. Elevators, carts, soft-soled shoes. The murmur of television spilling light into open doors. The occasional sob caught and swallowed. Underneath all that, I heard it tick, not the clock. Its beat was steady and small. This was irregular, wet, like a drop of something thick hitting stone. Tick. I knew that sound. I had heard it in San Michele, when wax slipped down the candles, and dropped onto the floor. One patient drop at a time. I turned my head. The lamp was off, but there was enough glow from the corridor to shape the things on the bedside table. The water glass, my hearing aid, a folded handkerchief, the small wooden cross. A wet line glistened down its surface. For a second, I thought a pipe had leaked. Then I smelled it. Wax, bitter and faint under the stronger scent of cleaning products. Wax and something else, older, that made the back of my tongue twitch. I reached out and touched the line. My finger came away dark. In the dim, it could have been anything. But when I brought it closer to my face, the smell changed. Rust, old pennies, bandage water. I wiped it on the sheet. The crucifix above my bed creaked. Wood does that. You will say buildings settle. Nails shift. Heat expands. Cold contracts. I have used all those phrases myself over the years. The way you use clean bandages to cover another man's wound. I looked up. Christ's head was turned not to the right, not to the left, not down at me. His painted eyes were aimed at the doorway. I could not see the corridor from my bed, only the slice of light under the door. It grew brighter for a moment as footsteps approached. A trolley wheel squeaked. Someone coughed. The light dimmed. The steps passed. The head of the crucifix did not move back. It kept staring at the door. I lay there, my hand sticky on the sheet, and counted the breaths between each tick of the clock. I waited for someone to cry out, for a call button to buzz, for the muffled rush that comes when staff move quickly. Nothing happened that night. The next afternoon, the nurse I liked least stopped coming to our corridor. They said her contract had ended. She had found work closer to home. The supervisor told us this with a smile that did not quite hide the tightness around her mouth. I saw the black car outside earlier that morning, the one from the hospital down the street. I saw the way the driver leaned back in his seat, hands on the wheel, eyes on nothing. I did not ask questions. Now, tonight, the crucifix's eyes have moved again. From the empty bed to the door, from the door back to me, then, slowly, down to the bedside table, to the small wooden cross that should not bleed. People say old men should not tell stories like this. Bad for sleep, bad for hearts. The night nurse would say, it is not good for my blood pressure to lie awake and watch painted wood. She is right. But I am not telling this for my sleep. I watch the head tilt another fraction, the neck strain that little bit more, and I remember Weber touching his cap. Kruger, his neck twisted toward the village, Henning his fingers, brushing his harmonica in the last light. Ohei standing under the cross and begging to be taken instead. The list in the little black book did not end with them. It has not ended yet. The crack in the small cross widens as I stare. A tiny flake of wood falls off and lands on the table with a sound I feel more than hear. If you can still move your thumb, you can press a button. If you can still hear, you can listen. If you want more stories that keep looking at you long after the screen goes dark, you can stay and listen to the next one. San Michele Solfume, Winter 1944, Grenadier-Regiment, 735. For the men who slept under the watching crucifix and did not come back.